America is back.
Is she? I see all these headlines about decline. And the media tell us
the decline of American power continues.
John Bolton says our enemies see that.
And I think when they see a declining, weakening America, it simply encourages them.
Pat Buchanan says we're committing suicide.
The United States is clearly, I think, in decline.
Glenn Beck says the republic will not last.
Serfdom is right around the corner. It's right around the corner.
And I worry that bureaucrats will regulate us into serfdom.
The regulatory environment in the last 5 years has gotten much, much worse.
The economy, the military, the culture.
Came right over here, please.
Are we going to hell in a handbasket? Or are complaints about decline just the standard whine we've always heard from crotchety old people?
Despite all of the problems we have more freedom now to live how we want to.
Is America in decline? That's our show tonight.
And now, John Stossel.
Tonight, we ask the question, is America in decline? Many people say yes. Few have said it as often or dramatically as Glenn Beck. He used to spend an hour every night on Fox, from the studio actually, saying that the survival of our republic hangs in the balance and wondering if we will close the book on America. What do you mean close?
I don't know if I said we're going to close
yes,
the book.
Yes, I'm quoting you here.
Really?
Close the book on America.
Quote him, he's a crazy man.
Well, I'm told that, but I'm giving you a chance to explain.
Well, I think we have a choice. I mean, John, you know it as well as I do. You look at the numbers, you use common sense, you see where we're headed. We're a country that is damn near insane in major cities and in Washington, D.C., and detached from everything that we used to hold dear.
Detached from everything we hold dear and chaos in the cities? I don't see that. I mean, by and large...
Have you been outside of New York City? Have you been on the streets?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Just did a book tour for my great new book.
All right, I didn't know if you saw the Occupy Wall Street. I don't know if you saw what was...
They're a tiny fraction of America.
They are
we are going broke.
They are a tiny. Yeah, they are a tiny.
Sorry.
They're a tiny fraction of America. But you just said we're also going broke. Yes, we are.
That's the big one.
You have slices of just about everything where we're losing. We're asleep. We are not holding ourselves responsible. And no one is holding anyone in Washington responsible. We're making progress. We're going in the right direction. But coming this September or November, we have a choice. And I don't think I've ever seen a clearer choice.
November, actually.
Yeah, I know. I don't think I've ever seen a clearer choice. And I'm not a Romney supporter. But with those guys, it's still a stark choice. Which path are we going to go on?
So one path, teaching dependency, the road to serfdom.
Right. The other path, a slower road to serfdom, a longer road to serfdom. But at least we will recognize that the road to serfdom is right around the corner. It's right around the corner. You take it all the way to the lemonade stands where they're trying to squeeze that out of us. Make sure you come to the government. Make sure you saw how long it took to get a lemonade stand in New York. I saw your episode.
More than 60 days, and I never got the permit.
Yeah, exactly right. What is that about? We're teaching our children all the wrong things.
And I'm glad what you're doing. You're running a national lemonade stand and bake sale, because some cities are banning bake sales, and hug-a-thon day.
Because you can't hug anybody anymore in school. What are we doing? Really, John? Is it really bad that our kids are hugging? No. It's not bad that our kids are hugging. It's that our kids are doing things beyond hugging that we don't even want. In the 1990s, we said oral sex doesn't matter. Yes, it does. We're finding out that yes, it does.
Before we go to oral sex, let's go back to hugging. You're talking about these schools that have told kids don't
hug each other.
And already teachers are being told, the head of the teachers union told me that he tells teachers, don't put a crying child on your lap to comfort her, even in kindergarten, never touch a child, because of fear of lawsuits, fear of accusations of...
Now, is that who we are? Is that who we are?
Well, but
is that
also wasn't good when teachers were molesting kids.
Teachers are still molesting kids. I mean, come on.
But is it worse? How do we know it's worse?
No, I'm not saying that it's worse. Are you saying it's better because we're not hugging? Really?
No, I think
Okay.
some people still do hug. People fight back.
Look, here's the point. We're teaching people not to connect with others. Teaching, instead of getting sued, don't reach out for a child who is seriously distraught and hug them and comfort them. That's not who we are. That's not who we are.
We certainly agree on that. And
What is the bake sale rule about?
to keep people from getting fat, and the lemonade rule to keep me from
It's
poisoning
not about
someone
that.
with
It's
my
not
lemonade.
no, it's not.
It's about control,
It's not.
controlling people?
It's about controlling people. Who does the bake sale? What does the bake sale teach? It teaches that if we come together, look, John, you do what you do. You make a great pie. I make a great cake. We'll just come together because we have this charity that we want to help. So we'll get together and we'll be friends and we'll do it ourselves. Well, if we can't do little simple things like that, well, then we're going to need somebody else to do it for us. Don't use your skills. Come and you'll have to fill out all the paperwork so you can raise money for this. That's not who we are there either. And I don't think we have a sweeping crime wave of death by poison from lemonade from 6-year-olds, do we?
We agree these rules are disgusting, but don't most people work around it? Kids still have lemonade stands. Nobody arrested me. Of course, I had cameras outside.
Yeah, that kind of helped.
But you told Andrew Napolitano, I don't think we'll survive 2016.
I don't think so we will.
It's only 4 years from now.
Do you think we're going to make it on this track that we're on?
I think in 2030 we'll be bankrupt and suffer great hardship, but I think the Republic
wait.
will survive. Yeah.
Okay, good.
I mean,
I disagree.
I look
look,
at...
look, here, look. Have you been watching what's going on in Europe?
Yes.
Okay. They told me 2 years ago it was insane that Nazis would get any kind of power in Greece. 2 years ago. Crazy. They now have 6%.
Is that power? That's some... 20% of Americans believe in ghosts.
20.
They're crazy
You do,
people
don't
around.
you? Wait. Here's the thing. 6%. 2 years ago, it was 0.03% that the Nazis had any kind of approval rating. 70 years ago, the Nazis killed 10% of the Greek population. Now their children and their grandchildren are going, you know what, maybe the Nazis have an answer. The problem is there's no reason, there's no logic being used. And if that's the case, if people continue to abuse their power and continue to abuse people's money, their tax dollars, and run us into incredible debt, as Europe goes, so will we. People listen to the extremes. That's not a good idea.
And you were anticipating riots from the extremes and violence in the streets.
Still do. I mean, I'm
in
sorry.
2016?
Oh no, I think we'll have real problems in the streets in around the election time. I think we'll have them this year. We already have. How many murders do we have with Occupy Wall Street? What is it, 6? Do we just dismiss that?
What?
How much damage?
6?
Haven't you done your murder? Haven't you done your homework on Occupy?
Not that. Six people were murdered.
6 people have been murdered in the
I
last.
know that. But the murder rate is down in America. The teen pregnancy rate is down. School violence is down. There's lots of good news.
What? I don't understand what this is. Your question is America in decline.
And I'm pushing back. I'm not so sure it is. We're financially going broke, but in other ways,
Morally,
we're doing well.
Morally, I think we are in trouble because our system is pushing the opposite direction on what made us great. What made us great was merit, individual merit. Being the strong individual that has an idea and you say, I'm going to go out and do it.
On that note, Glenn Beck, thank you. Coming up, more doom and gloom. Our culture's in decline, our military, economy, it's what the experts say. But are they nuts? I hope they're wrong, and I'll fight with John Bolton, Pat Buchanan, and others next. When people say America's in decline, often they're talking about the military. Many Republicans say President Obama has made us weaker and that we're less able to protect ourselves and our allies. Former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, says that. So what do you mean?
Well, I think whatever order and stability there is in the world, and there isn't that much, but whatever there is essentially provided by the United States and its system of alliances. I'm not of the view that the United States is the world's policeman. I think our role is to protect our interests and those of our friends and allies. But we are the only world power, and it's a big job.
But why is that good? Doesn't our role as the dominant power have a negative impact? I mean, if there were Chinese security forces outside the studio frisking me to make sure I wasn't a threat to someone, I would be furious. And I think these other countries get furious when we have troops everywhere.
Well, I think most other countries understand and appreciate the role that we play. And what criticism we get often masks the private position, which is that they understand that only the United States can play that role. Now, don't get me wrong. I think a lot of other countries are free riding on the United States.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of other countries, including our best friends in the NATO alliance in Europe, should do a lot more to help protect their own security.
So why don't we spend less and then they'll do more? They're freeloading.
Well,
you're against the welfare state. You're conservative. We got the welfare world.
Well, a lot of it is, but other countries, I think, are stepping up. Japan is a good example. I think countries like Britain and France do try to pull their own weight, but I think there are plenty that don't. So I think one role for an American president is to be much more assertive in saying, if you want to be under our umbrella, then you have to play your role.
And government leaders like our umbrella of protection, but don't we make new enemies? I would think that war is increasingly asymmetrical and that a kid can make an IED, improvised explosive device. I would think our main goal should be not to tick people off around the world.
Well, that is what the view that Gene Kirkpatrick once called the blame America first view, that people are, sweet and benign, and they sort of sit around until they get irritated by the United States, and then they become a problem. I think it's the exact opposite. I think a strong America deters those who would do us harm, and I think when they see a declining, weakening America, it simply encourages them.
All right, when you talk about a strong America, I look at what some people want our military to do. Protect the sea lanes, keep oil cheap, secure the internet, contain China, transform failed states into democracies, chase terrorists, train foreign militaries to chase terrorists, stop genocide, protect innocent people, protect other states from aggression. It's endless, which is the problem.
Well, it can be endless, and there are some things you've read on that list, like bringing democracy and the like to the entire world. I don't define that as being part of America's interest. I agree with John Quincy Adams when he was Secretary of State when he said, "America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy, is the well-wisher of the liberty of all, but the defender only of its own."
So you're glad we're coming out of Afghanistan and Iraq?
No, here's the difference. I think there was too much effort under the Bush and the Obama administrations in Iraq and Afghanistan on nation building. I think that's a mistake. I don't think we can build other nations any more than the government can build the U.S. nation. I think the people themselves have to build it. What we should have been doing more, and what we're risking a huge defeat on by not doing more of, is the military side of things. Not to protect Iraq, not to protect Afghanistan, but to protect ourselves. And when we lost sight of that, I think that's when the American people began to tune out.
We should stay there to protect ourselves.
Yeah, we will, of necessity, I think, bring benefits to the Iraqis and the Afghans because of our presence. But we're not there to make them the Switzerlands of Central Asia and the Middle East. We're there to defend American interests.
And we need to spend more to do that?
I think we need to raise spending because of the nature of the threats we face. And some of the things that we're doing with more expensive technology save American lives. The drones, for example, that people are talking about, even if they get shot down, at least no American pilots are getting killed. I think that's good. I would spend more money to protect more American lives.
Right now we have 28,000 soldiers in South Korea, 53,000 in Germany. This is necessary?
Well, I would move a lot of the troops from Germany to other places in Eastern, Central Europe, closer to the potential danger zones in the Middle East. I think the troops we have in South Korea, which are going to be repositioned, I hope, are in a good place in case there's trouble in East Asia.
But we can't cut the number.
Well, I think you have to look at what the threats are. And I would say that the threats we face are growing. We see an increasingly assertive, even belligerent China with a massive buildup in both its conventional and nuclear forces. We see Russia.
But why is it in their interest to attack? I don't see them attacking us.
It's not, John, it's not a question.
The Russians were going to attack us. They had missiles aimed at us.
It's not a question of attacking us. They don't want to do it. They want to use their growing force and economic power to increase their influence to the point of hegemony in their region.
What does that mean? And trade is win-win both sides.
Well, there's political influence as well, and there's economic dominance.
What does economic dominance mean?
Well, I think it means the ability in the case of China to impose its will politically and economically on those countries, potentially.
But how? Like what? I mean, they want to sell us stuff, and we want to buy stuff, and it's trade. It's win-win.
I think it goes to the terms of trade and the ability of China to get better terms for its side.
They can't force anybody to buy their stuff.
That's true, but they can sell, and what they are doing, and the way they have influenced, is to tilt the economic marketplace in their direction. I think it's a question of trying to calibrate what our interests are worldwide and having the assets and the political willpower to be able to defend them. It's when people see us as losing our willpower, as falling into the same kind of declinist mode that you see all over Europe, and not being willing to spend what it takes to defend our interest, that they say America can be taken advantage of.
Interesting conversation. We can debate what is decline. Ambassador Bolton, thank you. Coming up, we hear all the time that American culture is going down the tubes. There's so much sex, drugs, violence, and a million other bad things. It's corrupting kids, corrupting everybody. But is that true? We debate that next. Is it just because I'm getting old, or is American culture much dumber and more crass than it used to be? On the magazine covers these days, it's the Kardashians and Jersey Shore. This is what young people are interested in? And even little kids have much more exposure to graphic porn and violent video games than adults used to have. So, what is the result? The New York Times talks about the decline of American exceptionalism. And on this show, my guests have said that America's culture is in decline. Nick Gillespie, the author of The Declaration of Independence, says that's nonsense. What do you mean it's nonsense?
Well, you can talk about what kids are watching, and they're watching more violence, they're watching more sex, they're watching more drug taking, and they're doing less of all of those things. When you look at all the data about long-term trends of teenagers, of high school seniors and people like that, they're having less sex than they used to in the 70s, they're doing less drugs than they did in the 70s or even the 90s, they're committing less crime than they did in the early 90s. So whatever they're watching, they're not acting out like that. And, more power to them. They seem to be getting the idea that you can watch this stuff rather than enact it in life.
And the predictions were horrid and convincing.
Right.
I mean, the violent video games are so graphic. One guy I interviewed said, we're teaching kids to kill.
Right. They mistake more people having a voice and a choice when it comes to cultural offerings and lifestyle offerings for America's decline. But in fact, what it means is that more people at more levels are free to pursue what they find, to be what they want to do. I mean, whether it's watching the Kardashians or watching the Hunger Games. It's funny when we talk about decline and whatnot. I can remember back when I was a kid, Dee Snider of Twisted Sister, the PMRC wanted to ban his record. We're not going to take it with Twisted Sister.
The PMRC is
the Parents Music Research Center, which was an attempt by Tipper Gore and other people to ban rock music that they thought was filthy, pornographic, satanic. And they didn't like Twisted Sister. Dee Snider came out okay. He's on The Celebrity Apprentice.
The Washington Times headlines: Americans see media aiding moral decline.
Yeah,
just assume there's moral decline.
Well, this is the question. How do you define moral decline unless you say, well, pornography is available and pornography is moral decline, so that's it. The fact is the divorce rate is better than it was under Ronald Reagan. Kids have less sex than they had under Ronald Reagan. They're smoking less pot. Things change. It is in our DNA that our kids are always disappointing to us. They're always more out of control or beyond our control. It's sadly Sadly for old people, that, it's not true. It's great for the rest of us.
And if you're ready to believe it, the media certainly feed us this stuff. Sure. Looking at some of these headlines, a troubling trend in teens drinking hand sanitizer.
That's right. Yeah, this was a big story in the LA Times as well as the USA Today. As many as 6 kids showed up over a long period of time in emergency rooms.
Getting the alcohol out of the hand sanitizer.
Yeah, and this goes along with things like butt chugging, which supposedly it's a huge trend now that kids are inserting beer bongs rectally.
Also a headline on vodka-soaked tampons.
That's right. This is absurd. These stories come around because they're very titillating. Everybody wants to read about out-of-control kids. There's a reason why Girls Gone Wild tapes still sell. But there's, just as, reading or watching pornography does not mean you're going to have more sex in your life. Reading about this stuff does not mean kids are actually acting that way, and they're not.
And how do you know they're not?
We know this from a wide variety of data sources that the government, which has every reason to exaggerate the bad behavior of children because then they can get more tax money for more programs to prevent it, they've been tracking this stuff, things like Monitoring the Future, which looks at the use of drugs and alcohol and tobacco for kids going back to 1975. They say it isn't happening. Unified crime reports show that violent crime rates are down and violent crimes by teens are down.
So good news. Be happy. Don't worry.
Well, no, I actually think that kids today do have some real problems, and the real problems don't come from their behavior. It comes from adults like you and me. We're screwing them by running a government that's spending too much and is destroying the economy.
Well, on that negative note, thank you, Nick Gillespie, editor of Reason TV. Coming up, Pat Buchanan says everything Nick Gillespie says is wrong, that America's culturally, morally, religiously, politically in decline. We'll fight next. Is America in decline? Absolutely, says Pat Buchanan. His book, which recently got him fired from MSNBC, argues that socially, culturally, morally, America has taken on the aspect of a decadent society. Suicide of a superpower, it's called, and it says we're a declining nation. Why?
Well, John, let's take a look at it. We're unable to win our wars. We can't control our borders anymore. We can't stop the hemorrhaging of our manufacturing abroad. We can't balance our budget.
There's too many at one time. We used to win. We didn't win Vietnam.
No, we began losing wars. That's quite right. Around the 1960s, we didn't lose that. I guess you could say at the end, the war was lost. The American army didn't lose it. But John, the basic problem is, I think culturally, morally, religiously, politically, if you take a look at it, we are not the nation we were under Kennedy and Eisenhower at all. Morally, we are divided. The fundamental faith of this country, Christianity, is clearly in retreat. We've got no common moral code. We're at each other's throats over what? Homosexual marriage, abortion, and things like that. But if you take a look at
so what? This is good conflict to discuss these things.
Well, it's good conflict to discuss it, but you've got a change going on in society that hadn't taken place in Western civilization in 2,000 years. I think we've undergone a moral, cultural, social revolution, which has made America really a nation in decline. Look at all the ways we're divided. We're divided, I think, religiously, no question about it. Racially, we're divided. Look at our politics.
But we've always been.
We have not always been as divided as we were. Look, I grew
Blacks used to be enslaved under Eisenhower's days. We had segregation. Things are better now.
I grew up in Eisenhower's Washington, D.C., and Kennedy's Washington, D.C. That's right, it was segregated. But that was a predominantly Christian community. We agreed.
Why is that better?
I'll tell you, why is it better? All right, I'll tell you why.
It meant gays were locked in the closet. It meant women couldn't have a credit card without her husband's permission. The good old days were not so good.
Well, the good old days were not so good, but at least we were one country and one people. I think if you take a look at what's happening today, John, do you think the country's a success today? America was 32% of the world economy in 2000. We're now 24%.
So what? The whole economy is bigger. China and India are richer. That's good for everybody.
Well, do you think it's a good thing that Western nation is in decline, Western nations are in decline, and not a single Western nation has a birth rate that will enable it to reproduce itself all across Europe.
That's the problem.
All right, the Germans are going to lose 8 million Germans between now and mid-century. Japan's going to lose 25 million people. The United States...
It's not my problem.
No, it's not your problem. Let's take America, the racial ethnic composition of this country. It used to be 90% of us were from Europe. We all had that ethnic core. 95% of us were Christian. So we had these tremendous things in common, religion and culture. Now the ethnic core, the white population's down to 63%. It will clearly be a majority by 2041, 2042.
Minority, you mean?
It'll be a minority, and we'll be a nation of minorities. And when it is, you ask yourself, what is it that holds us together? If we don't believe in the same God, we don't have the same religion, we don't have the same moral code. We don't agree on what's right and wrong. We're at war with each other over race.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. We have the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. We have the right to, we have liberty and the right to pursue happiness. That's enough for me.
Constitution, it's enough for you?
It's
what does the Ninth Amendment say about abortion? I don't know.
I have no idea.
Well, what it says is it said nothing at all until suddenly it now says that abortion is not only legal but constitutional. What I'm saying, John, is look at the Constitution. We don't agree on it. You got your Supreme Court polarized and divided.
But that's always been true. We've always had fights over what the rules should be and what the Constitution means.
Well, let me ask you, do you think this country is as strong and stable and secure and as dominant as it was under Eisenhower and Kennedy?
I don't see why we need to be dominant. Under Kennedy and Eisenhower, the Russians had all these missiles pointed at us. I think we're more secure now. I think we're living longer, we're richer. We're not as dominant over the rest of the world, but who needs to be?
Let me clue you in.
We're better off than...
The Russian missiles are still pointed at you.
But I see the good things. I see longer lifespans, school violence is down, murder is down, teen pregnancy is down.
You've got a lot of things. I'm not saying America is completely
How about
gone.
intermarriage? Intermarriage is up. I think that's a good thing.
Well, you know, I mean, I don't know whether that's good or bad or whatever, but what I'm saying is, if you take a look at the objective statistics, the social indicators and all the rest, the international indicators, the United States is clearly, I think, in decline. And this is what Toynbee and some of the great historians said, that, you know, civilizations die not by murder, but by suicide.
Well, I think we have problems, but we agree to disagree about this. Thank you, Pat Buchanan.
Thank you.
Coming up, why I think America is a declining nation and why I'm probably wrong about that. When I hear people say America's in decline, I'm skeptical. Every generation raves about the good old days, but the good old days were not so great. And it's a good thing that decade after decade, despite our problems, America has gotten wealthier and healthier too. But one reason I worry now is that one aspect of America does keep getting worse, and that's this. The number of rules we're supposed to obey. The federal government already has 160,000 pages of regulations. That's what you're looking at here. And they add new ones every day. If America is to prosper, we need people starting new businesses. But who wants to start something if you have to hire an army of lawyers to go through all that? And even after they do, you can't be certain you're in compliance with every law in that pile. Even the feds don't understand their own rules. Yet, liberal columnist Ellis Hennigan believes that many of those regulations are good and some should be stronger, right? You're looking very serious there.
Very
okay.
true. Thank you.
Vernon Hill, who started Commerce Bank, disagrees. Why do you disagree?
The unintended consequences of these laws, no one knows. In the banking world, we've gone from 24,000 banks in America down to a much smaller number, and in the process, they've shrunken America's ability to support small business and growth.
All right, and I should just add that for the audience, you're a stutterer. That's what the blocking is. I like to have stutterers on my show because I'm a stutterer myself. But let's get to the facts here. Isn't this too much?
I mean, it sounds terrible. I mean, it's a lot of boxes. I'll give you that. But let me show you why it isn't quite as bad as you guys are suggesting. Here in America, we are the ones who are still, even despite all of that, creating all the great stuff, the creativity, the new industries. You only have to go to the middle of Manhattan or to the Silicon Valley to see what I'm talking about. This really is the engine of ideas in the world, and it's more so today than ever.
But for how long if everybody has to read all that?
John, listen. Business people always don't want to be regulated. If you tell the restaurant they can't serve poison to the customers, they're going to say, "Oh my gosh, it's terrible! You're handcuffing my creativity."
I would argue
stuff goes on.
They don't want to serve poison to their customers because they would go out of business without rules, just from word of mouth. I got poisoned in this restaurant.
Well, you would hope, but sometimes people, even if they're not controlled, do some bad stuff. Capitalism unfettered is not the answer. It's to have sensible regulation. We can argue about whether this reg or that reg is a good idea, but I don't think you want to throw this stuff out whole scale.
Well, nobody's talking whole scale, but I'd like to throw 90% of it out. Vernon, you started Commerce Bank, so there was nothing there at the beginning. Now there are 500 banks, 16,000 employees. So you created wealth. Yeah. You did this by trying new stuff. You were open 7 days a week. No overdraft fees, your motto, no stupid fees, no stupid hours.
And no stupid rules.
And no stupid rules. But now you're starting a new bank, and you won't start it here.
I started a new bank in Britain. It's the first new bank to be opened in Britain in 100 plus years.
Why not in America?
The business environment is more pro-business in Britain than it is in America. And this is what no one would expect. We think Europe and
Britain is a mess.
The regulatory environment here is so overwhelming and so micromanaging of our business. It is destructive to growth.
So, Ellis, yes, America has created wonderful things. The Silicon Valley example you use, though, I think works against your point because they got rich because they were far from Washington. There were no rules for this stuff because it was a brand new idea.
Well, I think there may be a conflict here between life experience and the rhetoric on this thing. I mean, I'm inspired by your story. It's terrific that you've been able to do this. 500 branches, one down the block from me. That's a great success. But yet, that success happened in exactly the regulatory environment that you all are bemoaning. Somehow or another, you were able to do it, as was Apple Computer, as was Microsoft, as were thousands of other success stories out there.
I think the point we're making is the regulatory environment in the last 5 years has gotten much, much worse. In a banking business, you're used to having rules and regulations, but it's gotten substantially worse in the last 4 or 5 years.
You know, there's a great way to avoid that.
Go to Britain.
Your colleagues behave responsibly. You know, this new regs came in because some bankers did some pretty awful stuff that did some real damage to our economy, and the government said, hey, hold on a second.
Well, of course, Ellis, that's not true. That's only one part of the rules. You're focusing on the showy items. There's 1 million micromanagement rules that happen every day because the government believes they can manage your business better than we can.
You say Dodd-Frank is a good thing.
Yeah, it's not as strong as I'd like, but it's going to do some good stuff, yeah.
All right, well, these are the banking regulations before Dodd-Frank. So everybody who wants to start a bank has to obey all this. And actually, this is just half.
Yeah. That's not even close.
Okay.
The goal is to make us safer. And the assumption is that in this paper, you can restrict the bad behavior in a way that protects consumers.
But there's some line in there that says, if I bounce a check, you can't charge me $200. And that's a good thing. I want that in there. I don't want them charging me $200.
Actually, there is no line in there.
There should be then. Let's get one in there.
There you are.
Let's get one in there right now.
And if there were a line in here, you don't think they were going to make it up somewhere else? You think you could just, by government top-down, fix it for the consumer?
Oh, listen, I'm not saying government ought to run everything, but I mean, it's also not true that business is grinding to a halt because of these photocopies you have here.
Yeah, we complain too much. We free market people. We don't want any rules. Business is doing fine.
We absolutely don't complain too much. We don't complain enough. The regulatory environment in the banking business and other parts of business in America has gotten completely out of control. Do you believe, Ellis, that an agency in Washington can make better decisions over the long term than the market. I don't.
Depends what those decisions are, right?
Well, and we've gone past the big important decisions into endless micromanagement.
Yeah. We can probably find some areas in there where we would say, well, this reg doesn't make sense or that reg. But boy, I want someone defending consumers in this process. I mean, business has a lot of power in Washington. Don't we want an agency like in Dodd-Frank they were getting that's going to be in there looking out for me?
But Ellis, who can defend us against them?
Ellis, your fellow liberals have said that to me. How come you libertarians are so nervous about government power, but you don't worry about corporate power?
Good question.
That's what you're saying.
It's a good question.
Corporations can't use force. Government can. No, his bank can't force me to bank with him.
Governments have tanks, Ellis.
Tanks.
Private corporations don't. They have the power of law.
Listen, we live in a mixed economy. Nobody is arguing for total government control.
But nobody's repealing anything.
Government control.
They just add more. Once in a while, they repeal a page or something.
Yeah. 500 branches under this regulatory system.
No, not under this regulatory.
No, you're wrong, Ellis.
500.
We stopped and sold out in 07.
Well,
someone couldn't take it anymore. All right. Thank you, Vernon Houck, Ellis Hennigan. Glad you guys are shaking hands. Coming up, my take on America in decline. Is America in decline? Glenn Beck says we won't survive 2016. Soon they'll be rioting in the streets. Ambassador John Bolton says we're destroying our military, making the world less safe. Pat Buchanan says because fewer Americans are white and European, we're declining morally, culturally, and ethically. Please, our diversity is a strength. And we still spend 7 times more on our military than the next biggest military, China's. And chaos and rioting? I doubt it. People have always predicted the collapse of America. 33 years ago, Jimmy Carter gave us that malaise speech.
It is a crisis of confidence, not only in government itself, but in the ability as citizens to serve as the ultimate rulers and shapers of our democracy.
That same year, the normally sensible George Will wrote, America's decline was accelerating along a downward crumbling path. And the CIA predicted that the Soviet economy would soon be 3 times bigger than America's. After the Soviet Union fell, this bestseller explained how Europe was surpassing us. Others said, no, it's not Europe, it'll be Japan. Neither surpassed us, of course. Our freer economy outperformed theirs. Not to say that we're not in danger now. It's possible we will regulate ourselves to death. All these rules is why job growth is stalled, and yet the idiots in Washington keep adding more. It's not just in Washington, in state capitals and cities too. Here in New York, my foolish mayor insists government must regulate what we eat. And on top of the burden of all these rules, politicians are spending us into oblivion. Social Security and Medicare are structured so that we baby boomers will do to you young people what I'm doing to these children, taking their stuff. Excuse me, I have to take some of these. No, I'm the old person. I need this. No, I won't give it back. I need that. More people are starting to understand this, even Bill O'Reilly.
If Washington continues to spend more than it takes in, and doesn't reform the tax code and entitlements, this nation will go into steep decline.
Yes. If he gets it, can the rest of America be far behind? Thanks to those of you who speak out about that, I see glimmers of hope. People who fear Obamacare will stop medical innovation have fought back, said, no, they can't. Funny, that reminds me of a good book that I highly recommend. It explains that government fails, but individuals succeed. Governor Scott Walker of Wisconsin told unions, no, you can't. And the public backed him up. Others have said, no, they can't, to teachers' unions and education bureaucrats. And that's broken the government's education monopoly. Now, 18 state-based school choice programs let poor kids break free from the monopoly. And many of those kids say They like to learn.
Reading is work, but it's rockin' awesome.
The invisible hand works. Around the world, since I started reporting, free markets have helped more than 1 billion people escape absolute poverty. That means living on $1 a day or less. Sweden and Germany liberalized their labor markets and saw their economies improve. East Asian countries embraced markets and flourished. Even statist nations in Africa. Now, there are growing numbers of free market activists critical of intrusive governments and of the foreign aid that prop them up. Unfortunately, some parts of America have not learned these lessons. Some politicians still want more government control. Legislatures in California, Illinois, and Connecticut pander to unions. And if you live there, you'll suffer for it. Sorry, but maybe your politicians are useful idiots, because when your state goes bankrupt, that'll wake other people up. Again, sorry if you live there. The great 20th century libertarian H.L. Mencken lamented, "A government, at bottom, is nothing more than a group of men, and as a practical matter, most of them are inferior men. Yet these non-entities, by the intellectual laziness of men in general, are assumed to have a kind of wisdom that's superior to ordinary wisdom." That is a sad truth. There is nothing that government can do that we cannot do better as free individuals and groups of individuals working together voluntarily, not at the point of a gun or under the threat of a fine. Without big government, our possibilities are limitless. That's our show. We'll have a new show next week, Thursday, 9 p.m. on the Fox Business Network. Thanks for watching.